Laura Davis stood on a deserted city street at midnight staring at 5 crumpled dollar bills in her hand. Her last $5, Emily's school lunch money for the week. Then she heard the sound. A man struggling to breathe. A powerful figure in an immaculate burgundy suit collapsed against a black SUV, clutching his chest. His face went pale. He was dying right there on the pavement, and no one else was around to help. "Walk away!" a passerby hissed from across the street. "That's Ralph Rush. That's trouble in a suit." Laura looked at the dying man, then at her $5. She thought about her daughter Emily waking up hungry at school tomorrow, but she couldn't just walk away. She ran to the corner vending machine, bought an energy drink with her last $5, and knelt beside him on the cold concrete. She saved his life without knowing who he really was. What Laura didn't know, that choice would change everything, because the next morning, 50 black SUVs rolled silently onto her street. Let me take you back to the morning before that dark street, before everything changed. Laura's alarm went off at 4:30 a.m., like it did every single day. She dragged herself out of bed in the cramped studio apartment she shared with her 7-year-old daughter, Emily. The place was tiny, worn down, in a neighborhood that had seen better days, but it was home. She walked into the kitchen and opened the cabinet. One box of crackers, nearly empty. A jar of peanut butter with maybe 2 spoonfuls left. She made a sandwich for Emily's school lunch and wrapped it carefully. Emily came padding out in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Morning, Mama." "Morning, Kai. Baby." Laura kissed the top of her head and handed her a glass of water. She didn't make breakfast for herself. There wasn't enough. This was life now. Counting every dollar, stretching every meal, praying that nothing unexpected happened, because there was no cushion, no safety net, nothing to fall back on. Laura worked 2 jobs. Days at a daycare center, watching other people's children for $12 an hour. Nights at a warehouse, loading boxes for the graveyard shift, her back aching by 2 a.m. Her car had been repossessed 3 weeks ago. She couldn't make the payments. So now she walked everywhere. Miles to work, miles home, in worn-out sneakers, with the sole peeling off the left shoe. And the bills kept coming. Rent was due in 2 days. She was $200 short. The eviction notice was taped to her door. Emily needed new school supplies. $40 she didn't have. The electricity had an overdue notice threatening shutoff. But Laura didn't complain. She'd learned a long time ago that complaining didn't pay the bills. Her mother had raised her with one simple rule. A dollar can feed you for a day, baby, but kindness can feed your soul for a lifetime. Laura tried to live by that, even when it felt impossible. Even when every fiber of her being screamed that she couldn't afford to be kind anymore. Not when she had Emily to protect. Not when they were barely surviving. But late that night, when she cut through that empty street on her way home from the warehouse, when she saw Ralph Rush collapsed on the pavement, gasping for air, his expensive watch glinting under the streetlight, she would be tested, and her mother's words would either save her life or destroy it. Before we continue, click subscribe, like this video, and leave a comment if you know that it is good to show an act of kindness anywhere, and any way you can. If you don't subscribe, maybe you're not in support of showing kindness. Now let's get back into the story. Laura stared at the eviction notice taped to her apartment door. Bold red letters screamed, "Final warning," across the top. She had 2 days. 48 hours to come up with $200, or she and Emily would be out on the street. She peeled the notice off slowly, folded it, and tucked it into her pocket before Emily could see it. Her daughter didn't need to carry that weight. 7 years old was too young to understand what homelessness meant. Too young to feel the shame that kept Laura awake every night. Inside the apartment, the air was cold. The water heater had broken last week, sputtering out one final time before going completely silent. Laura had called the landlord 3 times. He'd laughed the last time she asked. "You're 2 months behind on rent, Laura. Fix it yourself or move out. So they lived with cold showers now. Laura had learned to heat water on the stove in the mornings, filling a basin so Emily could wash her face and hands with something warm. It wasn't much, but it was something. She walked to the kitchen and opened the pantry. One sleeve of crackers, a can of beans, half a jar of peanut butter. She opened the fridge, a carton of milk with maybe 1 glass left, 2 eggs, a withered apple. Laura did the math in her head. If she stretched it, rationed carefully, they could make it 3 more days, maybe 4 if she skipped meals. She'd gotten good at skipping meals. Her stomach growled, a hollow ache she'd learned to ignore. She poured the last of the milk into a cup for Emily and set it on the small table. Then she made a peanut butter sandwich, carefully spreading it thin to make the jar last. She wrapped it in a paper towel and placed it in Emily's school bag. Lunch for tomorrow, 1 meal secured. Laura pulled out her wallet and counted what was left. 5 $1 bills. That was it. Her entire financial existence folded into 5 pieces of paper. She'd gotten paid yesterday from the daycare, $48 for 4 10-hour shifts. She'd immediately paid $30 toward the electricity bill to keep the lights on. $10 went to the bus pass so she could get to work this week. That left $8. Then this morning, Emily's teacher had sent a note home. School supplies needed, pencils, notebooks, crayons. $3 at the dollar store. Laura had bought them on the way home, her hands shaking as she handed over the bills. Now she had $5 between her family and complete ruin. Laura sat down at the table and put her head in her hands. The weight of it all pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing. The eviction, the broken heater, the empty pantry, the constant grinding fear that one more thing, just one more unexpected expense, would break them completely. She thought about her mother. Gone 5 years now, but her voice still echoed in Laura's mind, clear as day. A dollar can feed you for a day, baby, but kindness can feed your soul for a lifetime. Her mother had said that all the time, even when they'd had nothing. Especially when they'd had nothing. She'd been a home health aide, working long hours for little pay, but she'd never walked past someone who needed help, never turned her back on a stranger in trouble. "Mama, why'd you give that man your lunch money?" Laura had asked once when she was 9, watching her mother hand a $5 bill to a homeless veteran outside the grocery store. Her mother had knelt down, looked her in the eye, and smiled. "Because he needed it more than I do, baby. And because kindness is the only thing in this world that multiplies when you give it away. You remember that." Laura remembered. But remembering didn't pay the rent. Remembering didn't fix the water heater or fill the pantry or keep the lights on. Kindness was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore, not with Emily depending on her, not when they were 2 days from the street. She looked at the $5 on the table, Emily's lunch money for the week. If she was careful, if she bought the cheapest options, she could stretch it. Monday through Friday, 5 days, $1 per day. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. Laura folded the bills carefully and slipped them into her pocket. Then she stood up, straightened her shoulders, and walked to the small mirror by the door. The woman staring back at her looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy bun. The same faded jeans and hoodie she'd worn for 3 days straight, because laundry cost money she didn't have. But she was still standing, still fighting. She grabbed her jacket and checked the time. 10:30 p.m. Her warehouse shift started at 11. 4 hours of loading boxes, her back screaming by 2 a.m., her hands raw and blistered. She'd be home by 3:30 by sleep for 2 hours, then wake up and do it all over again. This was life now. Survival, $1 at a time. Laura kissed Emily's forehead as her daughter slept peacefully in their shared bed. Then she stepped out into the cold night, the $5 heavy in her pocket, and started the 2-mile walk to work. She had no idea that in less than an hour, those $5 would change everything. The warehouse shift ended at 3 in the morning. Laura clocked out, her back aching, her hands throbbing from 4 straight hours of lifting boxes. The night supervisor barely looked up as she left. Outside, the city was silent. That strange, empty silence that only exists in the dead hours between night and morning. Streetlights cast long shadows across empty sidewalks. A cold wind cut through her thin jacket. Laura started walking. 2 miles home. She'd done it so many times she could walk it with her eyes closed. Down 5th Street, across the bridge, through the warehouse district, then into her neighborhood. But tonight, she was exhausted, bone-deep, soul-crushing exhausted. Every step felt like lifting concrete blocks. Her feet burned in her worn-out sneakers. All she wanted was to collapse into bed next to Emily and sleep for a few precious hours before doing it all over again. She stopped at the corner of 5th and Morningside. Ahead of her, the usual route. Safe, well-lit, the long way. Behind her, cutting through the old financial district. Dark, empty. But it would save her 10 minutes. 10 minutes she desperately needed. Laura looked both ways, then turned down Morningside Avenue. The street was lined with old office buildings, most of them vacant now. Businesses had moved out years ago, leaving behind hollow concrete structures with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. During the day, it was merely depressing. At night, it was something else entirely. Her footsteps echoed, the only sound in the darkness. She walked faster, keeping her head down, her hands in her pockets. Just get through it. Just get home. Then she saw the car, a black SUV, expensive and gleaming even in the dim streetlight, completely out of place on this abandoned street. The driver's side door was open. The interior light cast a pale glow across the pavement. Laura slowed. Something was wrong. Then she saw him. A man sat on the ground, his back against the rear tire of the SUV. Even collapsed on the pavement, everything about him screamed power and money. A burgundy 3-piece suit, perfectly tailored. Italian leather shoes. A gold watch that probably cost more than Laura made in a year. His hair was slicked back, silver at the temples, and a gray beard framed his face. But his face was pale. Deathly pale. He clutched his chest with one hand, the other braced against the car. His breathing came in short, desperate gasps. Laura froze 20 feet away. The man's eyes found hers. Even in pain, they were sharp, intelligent, calculating. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but only a wheeze came out. Walk away. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away. This wasn't her problem. This man clearly had resources. Someone would find him. Someone would help him. She needed to get home to Emily. She took a step back. Hey! Laura jumped. A figure emerged from the shadows across the street. A young man, maybe 25, in a delivery uniform. He'd been walking the opposite direction, apparently cutting through the same desolate shortcut. He looked at Laura, then at the man on the ground, then back at Laura. His eyes were wide, urgent. He walked quickly toward her, his voice low. You see that guy? Laura nodded, her heart pounding. The delivery man moved closer, his voice barely above a whisper. That's Trouble in a Suit. That's Ralph Rush. The name meant nothing to Laura. She stared at him blankly. The man's eyebrows shot up. You don't know? Ralph Rush? The Ralph Rush? He glanced nervously at the figure slumped against the SUV. That man runs half this city, connected to everything, the kind of man you don't mess with. Laura looked back at Ralph. He'd slumped further down, his head tilting to the side. Walk away, the delivery man said, his voice firm now. Seriously, people like that? They're dangerous. You get involved, you don't get uninvolved, trust me. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked quickly down the street, his footsteps fading into the darkness, leaving Laura alone. She stood there, frozen between two impulses. Run. Help. Run. Help. Ralph's breathing had become even more labored, a horrible, rattling sound. Laura thought about Emily asleep in their bed, thought about the eviction notice in her pocket, thought about the $5 that was all they had left in the world. Getting involved with someone dangerous could destroy everything, could put Emily at risk. But she also thought about her mother, kneeling beside the homeless veteran, handing him that $5 bill without hesitation. Kindness is the only thing in this world that multiplies when you give it away. Ralph's hand slipped from his chest. His eyes fluttered closed. Laura made her decision. She ran toward him, her worn sneakers slapping against the pavement, her exhausted body moving on pure instinct. She dropped to her knees beside him, ignoring the cold concrete, ignoring the voice in her head screaming that this was a mistake. "Sir? Sir, can you hear me?" Ralph's eyes opened slightly, unfocused, struggling. Laura's mind raced. Heart attack? Stroke? She didn't know, but she knew he needed help. Fast. She pulled out her phone. No signal, not one bar. This part of the city was a dead zone. Damn it. She looked around desperately. Empty street. No cars. No people. Just darkness and silence and a dying man. Then she saw it. Across the street. Tucked into an alcove. A vending machine, its light glowing faintly. Laura's nursing assistant training from years ago kicked in. She'd only completed one semester before dropping out when Emily was born, but she remembered enough. The pale face, the chest pain, the shallow breathing, the cold sweat on his forehead. Low blood pressure, possibly cardiac. He needed sugar. Fast. She looked at Ralph, then at the vending machine across the street. Her hand went to her pocket, feeling the $5. Emily's lunch money. 5 days of food. All they had. Ralph's breathing became more shallow. His lips were starting to turn blue. Laura pulled the bills from her pocket. Her hands were shaking. "I'm sorry, baby. Mama's so sorry." She sprinted across the street to the vending machine. The display glowed in the darkness, showing rows of drinks and snacks behind scratched plexiglass. Her eyes scanned desperately. Energy drinks, bottom row, the kind with high sugar content and electrolytes. She fed the $5 into the machine. The bills were crumpled, and the machine rejected the first one twice. She wanted to scream. Finally, it accepted the money. She punched the button, C7. The mechanical arm moved with agonizing slowness, grabbed the blue can, and dropped it into the slot. Laura grabbed it and ran back, falling to her knees beside Ralph. She cracked open the can with trembling fingers. "Sir, I need you to drink this. Can you hear me? You need to drink." Ralph's eyes opened slightly, confused, unfocused. Laura slipped her arm behind his shoulders and lifted him slightly, supporting his weight. Up close, she could see the details. The expensive cologne, the platinum cufflinks, the custom-tailored suit. Everything about him was a different world from hers, but right now he was just a man dying on a sidewalk, and she was the only one here. She brought the can to his lips. "Small sips. Come on, you can do this." Ralph's lips parted. She tilted the can carefully, and he managed a small swallow, then another. The sugary liquid seemed to register. His eyes focused slightly. "That's it. Keep drinking. Slow." She held him there, cradling his head against her shoulder, one arm supporting his back, the other holding the can to his lips. He drank more. His breathing began to steady, just slightly. The blue tint faded from his lips. Laura felt his heart beating against her arm, fast but stronger now, more regular. "You're okay. I've got you. Help is coming." She had no idea if help was coming, but she said it anyway. "Just stay with me." Ralph's hand moved weakly, gripping her jacket. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, there was recognition in them. Awareness. He tried to speak, but only a hoarse whisper came out. "Who? Shh. Don't talk. Just breathe. Keep drinking." She gave him more of the energy drink. He managed several more swallows. Color was returning to his face. His breathing was deeper, more controlled. Then she heard them. Engines. Multiple vehicles, moving fast. Two black SUVs came screaming around the corner, tires screeching. They slammed to a stop. Doors flew open before the engines even cut off. Men in dark suits emerged, 4 of them. They moved with military precision, hands reaching inside their jackets. "Don't move!" one of them shouted. Laura froze, her arms still around Ralph. The largest of the men rushed forward, his face twisted in fury. "Step away from him! She's helping him, Victor!" Ralph's voice weak but clear. His hand tightened on Laura's jacket. "Stand down!" Victor stopped. His eyes went from Ralph to Laura, assessing. "Boss, are you—" "She saved my life." Ralph's voice was stronger now. He pushed himself up slightly, still leaning on Laura. "I had an episode. She helped me." The other 3 men surrounded them, creating a protective barrier. One was already on a phone. "We need a medical team. Morningside and 5th. Now." Victor knelt down on Ralph's other side. "Boss, what happened?" "My medication. I forgot it today." Ralph's breathing was still labored but stable. "Blood pressure dropped. I couldn't reach my phone." Victor looked at Laura. Really looked at her for the first time. At her worn clothes, her exhausted face, the warehouse badge still clipped to her jacket. Then his eyes dropped to the energy drink in her hand. "You gave him that?" Laura nodded. "He needed sugar for his blood pressure." Victor stared at her. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. "What's your name?" Ralph asked. "Laura. Laura Davis." Ralph's hand tightened on her jacket. He looked at her with an intensity that made her want to look away. "Laura Davis, you saw a man, not a monster." "I saw someone who needed help." A black Mercedes pulled up. A man in a white coat jumped out, carrying a medical bag. He immediately began checking Ralph's vitals. Victor stood and gently helped Laura to her feet. "You should step back, ma'am. Let the doctor work." Laura stumbled backward, her legs weak. She watched as the doctor worked on Ralph, wrapping a blood pressure cuff around his arm. Victor pulled out a wallet thick with cash. "Let me give you something for your time." "No." Laura's voice was sharper than she intended. "I didn't do it for money." Victor stopped. He studied her face. "Then why?" "Because he needed help, that's all." Ralph was watching her from the ground, even as the doctor worked on him. His eyes never left her face. Victor slowly put his wallet away. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Black, matte finish. Nothing on it except a phone number and a small embossed logo, a phoenix rising from flames. "This is Mr. Rush's private line. He'll want to thank you properly, please. Call it tomorrow." Laura took the card, her fingers numb. The doctor was helping Ralph to his feet now, supporting him toward the Mercedes. Ralph paused, turned back to Laura one more time. "You'll be repaid, Laura Davis. I promise you that." Then he was gone, guided into the Mercedes. The vehicle pulled away smoothly. The 2 SUVs followed, and suddenly the street was empty again, silent. Laura stood alone under the streetlight, staring at the business card in her hand. She'd just used her last $5 on a complete stranger, a stranger people warned her was dangerous. Laura looked down at her empty hands and started the long walk home. Laura stood frozen under the streetlight, watching the taillights of the Mercedes disappear around the corner. The 2 SUVs followed, their engines fading into the night, and suddenly the street was empty again, silent. Like the last 10 minutes had been a hallucination, but her hands still trembled, her knees still ached from kneeling on the concrete, and the business card felt real enough, smooth and heavy between her fingers. She looked down at it, black cardstock, expensive quality. Nothing printed on it except a phone number in silver ink and a small embossed logo she could barely make out in the dim light. She tilted it toward the streetlight. A crown. Or maybe a phoenix. The image seemed to shift depending on the angle. No name. No address. No company. Just a number. And a symbol. Laura flipped it over. Blank on the back. Her heart was still pounding. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, replaced by a creeping sense of unreality. Had that really just happened? Had she really just saved the life of Ralph Rush, whoever he was? Had armed men really surrounded her? Had that man really promised to repay her? She slipped the card into her pocket and looked around the empty street. 3:30 in the morning, still a mile and a half to walk home. Her body ached with exhaustion, but sleep felt impossible now. Laura started walking, her mind racing. You saw a man, not a monster. What did that mean? Why had Ralph said it like that with such intensity, like those words carried weight beyond their simple meaning? And why had everyone warned her away from him? The delivery man had looked genuinely frightened. Victor and his men had moved like soldiers, hands reaching for weapons. These weren't ordinary people. Ralph Rush wasn't an ordinary man. But lying on that pavement, gasping for air, his face pale and his lips turning blue, he'd just been human. Vulnerable. Mortal. Laura's mother's voice echoed in her head again. Kindness is the only thing in this world that multiplies when you give it away. Had she multiplied anything tonight? Or had she just made the biggest mistake of her life? She crossed the bridge into her neighborhood. The streets were more familiar here, but no less empty. A stray cat darted across the road. A distant siren wailed somewhere in the city. Laura reached into her other pocket, the one without the card. Her fingers found something. Coins. She pulled them out and counted them under a streetlight. 50 cents. 2 quarters. The vending machine had given her change. She'd been so focused on Ralph, so panicked, she hadn't even noticed. 50 cents. That was everything she had left in the world. Not enough for bus fare, not enough for a loaf of bread, not enough for anything. Laura closed her fist around the quarters. Emily's lunch money was gone, used on a stranger in an expensive suit. A stranger who'd promised to repay her, but promises were just words. Words didn't feed a 7-year-old girl. What had she done? She thought about tomorrow. Emily would wake up excited for school. Laura would have to pack her lunch, but there was nothing to pack. Crackers and peanut butter maybe, if she split it thin enough. Water instead of juice. And the day after tomorrow, the eviction. The landlord wouldn't care about promises from men in expensive cars. He wanted cash. $200 cash that Laura didn't have and had no way of getting. She'd saved a man's life tonight, and in doing so, she might have destroyed her own. Laura reached her building. The eviction notice was still on her door, slightly fluttering in the night breeze. She pulled it off, crumpled it, and shoved it in her pocket with the business card. Inside, the apartment was dark and cold. Emily was exactly where Laura had left her, curled up in their shared bed, her small body rising and falling with steady breaths. Peaceful, unaware. Laura sat down on the edge of the bed and pulled off her worn sneakers. Her feet throbbed, her back ached, every part of her body screamed for rest, but her mind wouldn't stop. She pulled out the business card again, studying it in the dim light from the window. The phone number gleamed silver. The crown, or phoenix, she still couldn't tell which, caught the light. Call it tomorrow, Victor had said. Should she? Would she? What if it was dangerous? What if Ralph Rush really was the kind of man people crossed the street to avoid? What if calling that number brought trouble to her door, trouble Emily didn't deserve? But what if he'd been sincere? What if he really meant to help her? What if that promise, "You'll be repaid," was real? Laura looked at her sleeping daughter, at the empty pantry, at the eviction notice crumpled on the nightstand. She had 50 cents to her name. She was 2 days from homelessness. She had nothing left to lose. Tomorrow, she would call the number. Tonight, she would sleep, if sleep would come. Laura lay down beside Emily, careful not to wake her. She pulled the thin blanket over them both and closed her eyes. But even in the darkness, she could see Ralph's face, the way he'd looked at her, the intensity in his eyes. You saw a man, not a monster. Laura held the business card against her chest and waited for morning to come. Laura woke to Emily tugging on her sleeve. Mama, I'm hungry. The sun was barely up. Laura checked the time on her phone, 6:15. She'd slept less than 2 hours, but her body was already forcing her awake, trained by months of survival mode. She dragged herself out of bed and walked to the kitchen. The pantry looked even emptier in the morning light. She pulled out the crackers and the jar of peanut butter, scraped out what was left and spread it thin across 4 crackers, made a sandwich and handed it to Emily. That's breakfast? That's breakfast, baby. Emily took it without complaining. She never complained. 7 years old and already she understood that complaining didn't change anything. Laura made herself instant coffee with water she heated on the stove. No milk, no sugar. Just bitter and black and hot. She needed it. A knock at the door made her jump. She opened it to find Mr. Bell standing there, her neighbor from 2 doors down, a man in his 50s with deep lines in his face and permanent disapproval in his eyes. He was the unofficial watchdog of the building, the one who noticed everything and judged most of it. Morning, Mr. Bell. Laura. He didn't smile. He never smiled. I need to talk to you. I'm kind of in the middle of... I saw you last night, coming home at almost 4 in the morning. Laura's stomach tightened. I was working late. You walked past my window. I saw your face. You looked shaken up. His eyes narrowed. What happened? Nothing. I'm fine. Don't lie to me, girl. I've lived in this neighborhood 40 years. I know trouble when I see it. He crossed his arms. Mrs. Chen said she saw you talking to some men in suits yesterday. Expensive cars. That true? Word traveled fast in this building. Too fast. I helped someone who was sick. That's all. Mr. Bell's face hardened. Who? Does it matter? It matters if you're bringing trouble to this building. We got families here. Kids. We don't need whatever mess you're mixed up in coming to our doorstep. Laura felt anger rising in her chest. I'm not mixed up in anything. A man needed help. I helped him. End of story. Was it Ralph Rush? Laura's blood ran cold. How do you... Because Marcus, the delivery guy who works nights, saw you. He told half the building already, said you were on your knees next to Ralph Rush on Morningside Avenue. Mr. Bell stepped closer, his voice dropping. Do you have any idea who that man is? Someone who is dying. Someone who's dangerous. Someone connected to things you don't want to be connected to. He shook his head. I thought you were smarter than this, Laura. You've got Emily to think about. I was thinking about Emily. I was thinking about doing what's right. Right? Mr. Bell laughed, bitter and cold. Right doesn't pay rent. Right doesn't keep you safe. Right gets you killed in this city. He turned to leave, then stopped. Whatever he promised you, it's not worth it. Stay away from men like that, for your daughter's sake. He walked away, leaving Laura standing in the doorway, trembling with anger and doubt. She closed the door and leaned against it. Maybe Mr. Bell was right. Maybe she'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe she should throw the card away and forget last night ever happened. But then she looked at Emily, eating her pathetic breakfast of crackers and peanut butter. Looked at the eviction notice on the counter. Looked at the 50 cents sitting on the table. She pulled out the business card. The black surface seemed to absorb the morning light. The silver number gleamed. The embossed logo caught her eye again, and this time she was certain. A phoenix, rising from flames. Laura picked up her phone. Her hands were shaking. She dialed the number. It rang once, twice. Ms. Davis. Victor's voice. calm, professional, like he'd been expecting her call. How did you? Mr. Rush gave me your name. I've been waiting for you to call. Laura's mouth went dry. I I don't know if I should have. But you did. That tells me everything I need to know. A pause. Mr. Rush would like to meet with you. Today, if possible. I have to work. Call in. This is more important. I can't afford to miss. Ms. Davis. Victor's voice was gentle but firm. Trust me. You won't regret it. Laura looked at Emily again. At the empty kitchen. At the eviction notice. Where? Downtown. Apex Tower. Penthouse level. Can you be there at 11? Apex Tower. Laura had walked past it 100 times. 60 stories of glass and steel in the financial district. The kind of building she'd never set foot in. I don't have bus fare. A pause. A car will pick you up. What's your address? Laura gave it to him, her voice barely a whisper. 9:30, black sedan. Don't be late. Victor paused again. And Ms. Davis, you made the right choice. Last night, and just now. The line went dead. Laura sat down at the table staring at her phone. Her heart was pounding again. What had she just agreed to? What was she walking into? Mr. Bell's words echoed in her head. Stay away from men like that. But she couldn't. She'd already crossed that line last night on a dark street when she'd chosen to help instead of walk away. Now she had to see where that choice led. Emily looked up from her crackers. Mama, are you okay? Laura forced a smile. Yeah, baby, I'm okay. But she wasn't sure if that was true. She wasn't sure of anything anymore. The black sedan pulled up exactly at 9:30. Laura watched from her window as it idled at the curb, sleek and expensive and completely out of place on her rundown street. Neighbors were already staring from their porches. She'd dropped Emily at the neighbor's apartment, promising to pick her up by noon. She'd changed into the only decent outfit she owned, black pants and a cream blouse she saved for job interviews. Both were worn and outdated, but they were clean. Laura walked out of the building with her head high, ignoring the whispers and stares. Mr. Bell stood on his porch, shaking his head as she passed. She didn't look at him. The driver, a young man in a crisp suit, opened the door for her without a word. Laura slid into the back seat. Leather interior. It even smelled expensive. They drove in silence through the city, leaving her neighborhood behind. The buildings grew taller, cleaner, newer. By the time they reached downtown, Laura felt like she'd traveled to a different world. Apex Tower rose into the sky like a monument to wealth and power. Glass and steel reflecting the morning sun. Laura had walked past it countless times, but never imagined she'd go inside. The driver pulled into an underground garage, led her to a private elevator, pressed a button marked P. The elevator rose so smoothly, Laura barely felt it moving. Floor numbers climbed, 40, 50, 60. The doors opened directly into a penthouse office. Laura stepped out and stopped breathing. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city, modern furniture in blacks and whites, abstract art on the walls. Everything screamed money and taste and power. Victor emerged from a side door. He looked different in daylight. Younger than she'd thought, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and an expressionless face. Ms. Davis, thank you for coming. He gestured toward a seating area by the windows. Mr. Rush will be with you shortly. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? Water would be good. He returned with a glass, the ice clinking softly. Then he disappeared through another door, leaving Laura alone. She sat on a leather chair that probably cost more than everything she owned, sipped the water, stared out at the city spread below like a map. She could almost see her neighborhood from here, a tiny corner of poverty in an ocean of wealth. Ms. Davis, Laura turned. Ralph Rush stood in the doorway. He looked completely different from the man on the pavement. Strong, healthy, commanding. The burgundy suit had been replaced with charcoal gray. His silver hair was perfectly styled. His face had color, life. But his eyes were the same, sharp and intelligent and focused entirely on her. "Mr. Rush, please, sit." He took the chair across from her, not behind the massive desk, like they were equals. "How are you feeling?" "I should be asking you that." A small smile. "I'm alive. Because of you." The doctors. The doctors said if you hadn't acted when you did, I would have died on that street. Ralph leaned forward. "So I'll ask again. How are you feeling?" Laura didn't know how to answer. Terrified? Confused? Desperate? All of it? "Honestly, I don't know why I'm here." "Because I owe you my life, and I pay my debts." "You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone would do." Ralph's expression changed, something between sadness and respect. "No, Laura. You did what almost no one would do, especially not for someone like me." "What does that mean?" He stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. "I'm sure people have told you who I am, what my reputation is. They said you're dangerous, connected. They're not wrong." He turned to face her. "My family built an empire in this city, not always through legal means. That's my legacy, whether I like it or not." He paused. "But it's not who I am. Not anymore." Laura waited, unsure what to say. Ralph walked to his desk and picked up a framed photograph. He handed it to her. A young woman, maybe 25, with Ralph's eyes and a brilliant smile. "My sister, Maria. She died 15 years ago." Laura looked at the photo. "I'm sorry." "She had a rare heart condition, same one I have. Hereditary." Ralph's voice was steady but heavy. "She needed treatment, surgery. We didn't have the money then. I was young, stupid, trying to build something from nothing. By the time I scraped together enough, it was too late." He took the photo back, staring at it. "She died in my arms in a free clinic waiting room, 26 years old, because she couldn't afford care." He set the photo down carefully. "That day I made a promise. No one else would die because they couldn't afford help." Ralph pressed a button on his desk. The wall behind him lit up, displaying a logo, a phoenix rising from flames, the same symbol on the business card. "The Phoenix Foundation. I started it the year Maria died. We help families who can't afford medical care, housing, food, education. We've helped over 8,000 families in 15 years." Laura stared at the screen. "But people think you're—" "A criminal? Yes." Ralph smiled grimly. "The reputation is useful. It keeps people at a distance. Keeps the foundation's work protected, but it also means people fear me, cross the street when they see me, warn each other to stay away." He looked directly at her. "You didn't. You saw a man dying and you helped. You used your last $5, money your daughter needed, to save a stranger everyone told you to fear." His voice dropped. "Do you know how rare that is?" Laura's throat tightened. "I looked into your situation, Laura. I hope you'll forgive that. But I needed to understand who you are." He paused. "Single mother, 2 jobs, facing eviction, bills you can't pay, and you still chose to help me." Tears burned Laura's eyes. Ralph sat down across from her again. "That choice, despite your desperation, tells me everything about your character. It tells me you're the kind of person Maria would have loved. The kind of person I want in my life." He leaned forward. "Laura Davis, you're family now, and I take care of family." "I don't understand." "You will." Ralph stood, extending his hand. "Trust me. The way I'm trusting you." Laura looked at his hand, strong, steady, offering something she couldn't quite name. She took it. Laura woke to the sound of engines, deep, rumbling, Synchronized. So many of them the windows rattled. She sat up in bed, disoriented. Emily was already at the window, her small hands pressed against the glass. "Mama, look!" Laura's heart stopped. The street was lined with black SUVs, dozens of them, maybe 50, parked in perfect formation on both sides, stretching as far as she could see. Men in dark suits stood beside each vehicle, arms crossed, faces expressionless. "Oh my God!" Laura jumped out of bed and ran to the window. This couldn't be happening. Ralph had said tomorrow. He'd said he wanted to help her, but he hadn't said anything about this. Doors were slamming throughout the building, voices shouting, fear spreading like wildfire. Laura grabbed her phone. No missed calls, no messages, nothing. She pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt, her hands shaking. "Emily, stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone." "Mama, I'm scared." "I know, baby. Just stay here. I'll be right back." Laura ran into the hallway. Neighbors were already pouring out of their apartments, faces twisted with panic and rage. Mrs. Chen clutched her grandson. The Rodriguez family huddled together. Young mothers held their children close. And Mr. Bell stood in the center of it all, his face purple with fury. "Laura!" He pointed at her like an accusation. "What did you do?" "I don't know." "Don't lie to me. This is because of you. Because of that man you helped." The crowd turned to stare at her, 20 faces filled with fear and anger. "Mr. Bell, I can explain." "Explain what? That you brought the mob to our street? That you put all our families in danger?" His voice rose to a shout. "There are children here, Laura. My grandkids are visiting, and now we've got 50 gangsters outside." Mrs. Chen's voice cracked. "Are they going to hurt us?" "Someone call the police," Rodriguez shouted. "I already did," Mr. Bell yelled back. "They said they're sending units." Laura's mind raced. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. Ralph had seemed so kind, so genuine. Had she been wrong? Had she led danger straight to her neighbors' doors? Everyone the— "Please!" Laura tried to speak, but her voice was drowned out. "You've destroyed this neighborhood." Mr. Bell stepped toward her, his finger jabbing the air. "We're all going to suffer because you couldn't mind your own business." "I was helping someone." "You were helping a criminal, and now look what you've done." The crowd pressed closer, angry voices overlapping, accusations flying. Laura felt the walls closing in, then a sound cut through the chaos. A loudspeaker, clear and amplified, coming from outside. "Attention, residents of Parkview Apartments. This is Victor Moretti, associate of the Phoenix Foundation. We are not here to cause harm. Please everyone come outside, we have an announcement." The hallway went silent. Mr. Bell's eyes narrowed. "Don't anyone move. This is a trap." But people were already moving toward the stairs. Curiosity overcoming fear. Laura followed, her heart pounding. Outside, the scene was surreal. 50 black SUVs lined both sides of the street. Men in suits stood at attention, and in the center of it all, Ralph Rush stood beside a black sedan, holding a microphone. He wore a navy suit today, no sunglasses, nothing to hide behind. He looked every bit the powerful man he was, but there was something else in his expression. Humility, maybe? Respect. The neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, a crowd of maybe 60 people, frightened, angry, confused. Ralph raised the microphone. "Good morning. My name is Ralph Rush. I know many of you have heard of me, and I know what you've heard isn't good." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mr. Bell crossed his arms, his jaw tight. "You think I'm here to threaten you, to intimidate you, to hurt your community?" Ralph's voice was calm, measured. "I'm not. I'm here because of one of your own, Laura Davis." Every head turned to look at her. Laura felt her face burn. 3 nights ago, I collapsed on a street downtown. I have a heart condition. My blood pressure dropped. I was dying. Ralph paused, letting the words sink in. Laura Davis was walking home from work, exhausted, broke, with every reason to keep walking, but she didn't. The crowd was silent now, listening. She used her last $5, money meant for her daughter's lunch, to buy something that saved my life. She knelt beside a stranger everyone warned her away from. She held me, comforted me, stayed with me until help arrived. Mrs. Chen's hand covered her mouth. I looked into Laura's situation. Single mother, 2 jobs, facing eviction. Bills she can't pay. Ralph's voice grew stronger. And she still chose compassion over survival. That is the rarest thing in this world. Mr. Bell's expression was changing, the anger draining away. I run the Phoenix Foundation. We help families in crisis. Medical bills, housing, education, food. We've helped over 8,000 families in 15 years. Ralph gestured to the SUVs behind him. These men and women are not gangsters. They're volunteers, staff, contractors, and they're here to help. He turned to look directly at Laura. Laura Davis showed me that kindness still exists, that humanity still exists, even in the darkest moments, even when it costs everything. Ralph's voice was thick with emotion now. She's family now, and we take care of family. Victor stepped forward, carrying something, a large envelope. Ralph took it and walked toward Laura. The crowd parted. He stopped in front of her, his eyes meeting hers. This is for you. Laura's hands shook as she took the envelope. It was heavy, official. Everyone watched in silence as she opened it. Inside was a check. She stared at the numbers, unable to process what she was seeing. $50,000. Her knees buckled. Ralph caught her arm, steadying her. That's to clear your debts. All of them. Rent, bills, everything. And to give you a cushion so you never have to choose between helping someone and feeding your daughter again. Laura couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The check trembled in her hands. There's more. Ralph nodded to Victor, who stepped forward with a folder. The Phoenix Foundation is offering you a position, Director of Community Outreach. $75,000 a year. Full benefits, health insurance, dental, vision, for you and Emily. Laura's vision blurred with tears. Your job would be to do what you did for me. Find people who need help. Connect them with resources. Be the person who sees past circumstances to the humanity underneath. Ralph's voice was gentle. You'd be perfect for it. Because you've lived it. The crowd murmured. Mrs. Chen was crying. Rodriguez had his arm around his wife. And one more thing. Ralph turned to address the whole crowd. This building, this community, you've struggled for too long. The Phoenix Foundation is going to renovate Laura's apartment. Completely. New everything. But we won't stop there. He gestured to the SUVs. These vehicles are full of supplies. Food, clothes, school supplies, furniture. For anyone who needs it. And over the next 6 months, we'll be opening a community center 3 blocks from here. Free medical clinic, job training, after-school programs, food bank, everything this neighborhood needs. The silence broke. People started talking at once, voices overlapping with disbelief and hope. Mr. Bell stepped forward. His face had completely changed. The anger was gone, replaced with something that looked like shame. Mr. Rush, his voice was quiet. I accused Laura of bringing danger here. I told her she'd made a mistake. He looked at Laura, his eyes wet. I was wrong. Dead wrong. Ralph nodded. You were protecting your community. I understand that. But Laura showed you something today. That sometimes the thing you fear is actually the thing you need. Mr. Bell turned to Laura. I'm sorry. I judged you. I judged him. He couldn't finish. Laura's throat was too tight to speak. She just nodded. I'll help, Mr. Bell said suddenly, looking at Ralph. Whatever you need. Renovation, moving supplies, whatever. I'll help. Me too, Rodriguez called out. And me, Mrs. Chen added. One by one, voices rose from the crowd. Offers to help, apologies, gratitude. Ralph raised his hand. We accept, all of you. That's what community means. He turned back to Laura. When can you start? Laura looked at the check in her hand, at Emily peeking out from the apartment doorway, at the neighbors who'd judged her now offering to help, at Ralph, who'd kept his promise. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. The tears wouldn't stop. Take your time, Ralph said softly, but Laura shook her head. She found her voice, broken and raw. You didn't just save my life. You saved hers. She looked at Emily. I didn't know how I was going to feed her, how I was going to keep a roof over her head. I was out of options. Ralph's expression softened. You talk about me seeing your humanity, Laura continued, her voice shaking. But you saw mine too. You saw past the poverty, the desperation, the worn-out clothes. You saw someone worth investing in. She wiped her eyes. No one's ever done that. Then they were blind, Ralph said simply. Laura laughed through her tears. When do I start? 2 weeks. That gives you time to get settled. Ralph extended his hand. Welcome to the family, Laura. She shook it, this man who'd been a stranger 4 days ago. This man everyone feared. This man who'd seen her act of kindness and multiplied it 1,000 times over. The crowd erupted in applause. Emily ran out and wrapped her arms around Laura's legs. Laura picked her up, holding her tight. Victor started organizing. Okay, folks, let's start unloading. We've got furniture, groceries, supplies. Laura's apartment first, then we'll set up distribution for the rest. The SUV doors opened. People emerged with boxes, furniture, bags of food. The neighbors who'd been terrified 20 minutes ago now rushed forward to help. Mr. Bell directed traffic. Mrs. Chen organized the food. Rodriguez and his sons carried furniture. The street transformed from a scene of fear to one of hope. Laura stood in the center of it all, Emily in her arms, the check still clutched in her hand. She watched Ralph coordinate with Victor, watched her neighbors work alongside the suited volunteers, watched a community come together. Mr. Bell approached carrying a box. He set it down and looked at Laura, really looked at her. Your mama would be proud. That thing she used to say about kindness, you proved it true. Laura's eyes filled again. She'd probably say I told you so. Mr. Bell smiled, the first real smile she'd ever seen from him. Probably would. He picked up the box and headed toward her building. Laura watched him go, then looked down at Emily. Mama, are we going to be okay? Laura kissed her daughter's forehead. Yeah, baby, we're going to be more than okay. For the first time in 3 years, she actually believed it. Ralph walked over, his expression peaceful. You know what Maria would say if she saw this? What? She'd say this is what love looks like, real love. The kind that sees someone struggling and says not on my watch. He looked around at the bustling street. You started this, Laura. One choice, one act of compassion, and look what it created. Laura looked too, at the community united, at the fear transformed to hope, at the impossible made possible, all because she'd stopped to help a stranger on a dark street, all because kindness really did multiply when you gave it away. 6 months later, Laura sat at her desk in the Phoenix Foundation headquarters, reviewing applications. The nameplate in front of her read, Laura Davis, Director of Community Outreach, in polished silver letters. She still wasn't used to it. The office with windows overlooking the city. The salary that meant she could buy groceries without counting every dollar. The health insurance card in her wallet that had already covered Emily's asthma medication and a dental checkup. Most of all, she wasn't used to the power she now held. The power to say yes, to change someone's life with a signature. Her phone buzzed. Victor's name appeared on the screen. The ribbon cutting is in an hour. You ready? Laura looked at the clock. 11 a.m. already. I'll be there. She gathered her things and headed downstairs. The black sedan that once seemed so foreign now felt normal. The driver, Marcus, smiled at her in the rearview mirror. Big day, Ms. Davis. The biggest. They drove through the city, back toward her old neighborhood. But it didn't look the same anymore. The buildings had been repaired. The streets were cleaner. New businesses had opened. The Phoenix Foundation's investment had rippled outward, touching everything. They pulled up to the new community center. A modern building of glass and brick, 3 stories tall, taking up an entire block. A banner stretched across the front. Grand opening, Laura Davis Community Center. Laura's throat tightened every time she saw it. Her name. On a building. A building that would help thousands. The parking lot was packed. News vans lined the street. Hundreds of people gathered, waiting. Laura recognized so many faces. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Bell, Rodriguez, and his family. Neighbors who'd feared the SUVs 6 months ago now stood proudly, waiting to celebrate. Ralph stood near the entrance with Victor, both in sharp suits. When he saw Laura, he smiled. There she is, the woman of the hour. This is too much, Laura said, gesturing at the banner. You didn't have to name it after me. Yes, I did. You're the reason it exists. Ralph guided her toward the podium set up near the entrance. You ready to cut the ribbon? Laura looked at the crowd, at Emily standing in the front row with the neighbor who now watched her after school, at the building that would house a medical clinic, job training center, food bank, and after-school programs, at the dream made real. I'm ready. Ralph took the microphone first. His speech was brief, focusing on the mission of the Phoenix Foundation and the importance of community investment. Then he handed the microphone to Laura. She looked out at the faces staring back at her. 6 months ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was standing in front of news cameras about to open a building with her name on it. 6 months ago, I used my last $5 to help a stranger, Laura began, her voice steady. I didn't do it for recognition. I didn't do it expecting anything in return. I did it because someone needed help, and I couldn't walk away. The crowd was silent, listening. What I learned is that one choice, one moment of compassion, can change everything. Not just for the person you help, but for yourself, for your community, for people you haven't even met yet. She gestured to the building. This center exists because of that choice, and it's going to help thousands of families. All because someone decided kindness was more important than fear. Applause erupted. Emily was crying. Mrs. Chen was crying. Even Mr. Bell wiped his eyes. Laura and Ralph cut the ribbon together. The doors opened. People flooded inside, exploring the bright, clean spaces filled with resources and hope. Laura walked through with Emily's hand in hers, watching families sign up for services, children running toward the after-school area, elderly residents learning about the free medical clinic. This was real. This was happening. Ralph found her an hour later in the food bank area, watching volunteers distribute groceries. You've done well, he said. Maria would have loved you. I wish I could have met her. You carry her spirit, that's enough. He paused. I have something for you. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check made out to Laura Davis. $25,000. What's this? Your 6-month bonus. You've exceeded every expectation. Found and helped 47 families. Every single one is thriving. Laura stared at the check. More money than she'd ever seen before this all began. That Sunday, Laura sat in her church. The small congregation she'd attended for years, where people had prayed for her during the hardest times, where the pastor had quietly helped with groceries more than once. The pastor was making announcements. We have a family in our congregation facing eviction, single mother, 3 children. We're taking up a collection to help with rent. Laura's heart ached. She knew that desperation, that fear, that feeling of drowning with no one to pull you up. After the service, she approached the pastor privately. The family facing eviction, how much do they need? About $3,000 for back rent and deposits. Laura pulled out her checkbook. She wrote a check for 5,000, handed it to the pastor. "This is anonymous. Tell them someone who's been there wants to help." The pastor's eyes widened. "Laura, this is incredibly generous." "It's necessary," Laura smiled. "And tell them something else. Tell them to pass it forward when they can, when they're stable, when they have the chance. Help someone else." The pastor nodded, tears in his eyes. Laura walked out of the church into the autumn sunshine. Emily was waiting on the steps, playing a game on the tablet Laura had been able to buy her. "Ready to go home, baby?" "Yeah. Can we get ice cream?" "We can get ice cream." They walked down the street together, hand in hand. Laura thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago. Desperate, broken, out of options. She thought about the $5 and the choice she'd made on a dark street. One act of courage had changed everything, and now she was passing it forward, multiplying kindness, creating ripples that would spread farther than she'd ever know. Her phone buzzed. A text from Victor. "New family needs help. Medical emergency. Can you take the case?" Laura smiled and typed back, "On my way." Because that's what she did now. She showed up. She helped. She saw people, not circumstances, just like someone had done for her. The cycle continued. And it would keep continuing, one act of compassion at a time, until the world looked a little more like the one her mother had dreamed of. A world where kindness fed souls, where people saw people, where one choice could change everything. Laura Davis had learned that truth on a dark street with $5 and a dying stranger, and now she was teaching it to everyone she met. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss it. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as you can ever imagine.